My son was born without me and grew up hating me. The words hit me like shrapnel every time I think them, which is most nights when the silence gets too heavy and the whiskey doesn't work anymore. 10 years I was gone, 10 years of his small hands learning to tie shoes without me, 10 years of bedtime stories told by someone else, 10 years of a boy wondering why his father chose strangers in a desert over him. My name is Marcus William Hayes. I'm 42 now, though some days I feel ancient, weathered down to bone and regret. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan between 2008 and 2018, a sergeant in the 82nd Airborne Division. When I left, Sarah was 5 months pregnant with our first child. When I came back, that child was 10 years old and called me strange uncle, like I was some distant relative who showed up uninvited to Christmas dinner. The deployment was supposed to be 18 months, then it became 24. Then I re-enlisted because staying felt easier than coming home to questions I couldn't answer and responsibilities that scared me more than Taliban mortars ever did. In Kandahar province, I knew my job. I knew how to read the terrain, how to spot an IED, how to keep my men alive. At home, I didn't know how to read a bedtime story or spot when a kid needed his father or keep a family from falling apart. So I stayed away, and Jake grew up thinking his father was a coward who abandoned him. The house felt foreign when I finally came back for good. Sarah had painted the walls colors I didn't recognize, hung pictures that documented a decade of birthdays and school plays and little league games I'd missed. Jake's room was a shrine to a childhood I'd never been part of, soccer trophies I hadn't cheered for, artwork I hadn't praised, report cards I hadn't signed. The boy himself looked at me with eyes that held no recognition, no warmth, just suspicion and something deeper that might have been contempt. "This is your father," Sarah said on that first morning, her voice careful and strained. She was older now, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when I left. Harder too, in ways that made me understand I wasn't the only casualty of my choices. Jake, all arms and legs and dark hair like his mother's, looked up from his cereal bowl and nodded politely. "Nice to meet you," he said, like I was the mailman or a door-to-door salesman. Then he went back to eating, and the sound of his spoon against ceramic filled up all the space where conversation should have been. I tried to tell myself it would take time, that 10 years of absence couldn't be bridged in a day or a week. But weeks turned into months, and Jake remained polite, distant, unreachable. He had his own life, his own routines, his own friends. I was an intruder in his world, and he made sure I knew it. The rebellion started small: missed curfews, grades sliding from B's to C's to D's. Sarah would find empty beer bottles in his backpack or smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. She'd lecture him, ground him, take away his phone. He'd nod and say yes ma'am, and then do exactly what he wanted anyway. When she tried to get me involved, to be the heavy-handed father figure, Jake would look at me with those cold eyes and say, "You don't get a vote, you weren't here." And he was right. I hadn't been there for his first word or his first step or his first day of school. I hadn't taught him to ride a bike or throw a baseball or stand up to bullies. I had no currency with him, no relationship to leverage. I was just some stranger who'd moved into his house and claimed the title of dad without earning it. By 15, Jake was running with kids I didn't like, dropouts and troublemakers who spent their afternoons smoking behind the grocery store and their weekends looking for things to break. He'd come home with split lips and scraped knuckles, claiming he'd fallen off his bike or walked into a door. The lies were clumsy, obvious, but when I tried to call him on them, he'd just shrug and walk away. "He's angry," Sarah said one night after Jake had slammed his bedroom door hard enough to rattle the windows. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of another tense dinner between us. "He's been angry since he was old enough to understand that other kids had fathers who came to their—" "I know he's angry," I said. "I just don't know how to fix it." "Maybe you can't," she said, and her voice was gentle but final. "Maybe some things are too broken to fix." But I couldn't accept that, not yet. In Afghanistan we had a saying, "Leave no man behind." I'd lived by that code for 10 years, and I wasn't about to abandon it now, even if the man I was trying to save was my own son. The idea came to me on a particularly bad night in late spring. Jake had been arrested for vandalism, spray painting obscenities on the side of the high school with two of his friends. Sarah had to leave work to pick him up from the police station, and the ride home was silent except for her crying. Jake sat in his room for the rest of the evening, music bleeding through the walls, ignoring our attempts to talk to him. I was in the garage, cleaning my old hunting rifle, a ritual that always calmed me when the noise in my head got too loud. When it occurred to me that maybe I'd been approaching this all wrong. Maybe instead of trying to be the father Jake needed now, I should try to give him what I had to offer, what I knew how to do. In the Army, I'd been a survival instructor for 2 years, teaching new recruits how to navigate, how to build shelter, how to find food and water in hostile terrain. Before that, my own father had taught me to hunt and fish and live off the land. It was one of the few good memories I had of him, those long weekends in the woods when it was just us and the silence and the understanding that came without words. Maybe Jake needed that too. Maybe he needed to learn that he could depend on himself, that he was stronger than he knew. Maybe he needed to know that his father had something to teach him, even if it wasn't how to throw a curveball or help with algebra homework. The next morning I knocked on his door. No answer, but I went in anyway. He was lying on his bed staring at the ceiling, earbuds in. I pulled one out. "I want to teach you something," I said. He looked at me with that familiar expression of barely contained annoyance. "I don't need how to shoot," I continued. "How to track, how to survive in the woods, real skills, things that might matter someday." For a moment something flickered across his face. Interest maybe, or just surprise. Then the mask came back down. "Why would I want to learn that?" "Because you're my son," I said, "and because you're tougher than you think you are. And because maybe it's time you learned what you're capable of." He was quiet for a long time, studying my face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Finally he shrugged. "Whatever, I guess." It wasn't enthusiasm, but it wasn't a no. I'd take what I could get. That Saturday I drove Jake out to the shooting range where I'd been going to keep my skills sharp. He was quiet on the drive, slumped against the passenger door texting someone on his phone. But when we pulled into the parking lot and he saw the long low building with its concrete walls and the sound of gunfire echoing from inside, he straightened up a little. "This is it?" he asked. "This is it," I said. "You ready?" The range master was an old Marine named Kowalski who'd lost his left arm to an IED in Fallujah. He took one look at Jake, all teenage bravado and nervous energy, and grinned. "First time?" he asked. Jake nodded. "Good. Means you don't have any bad habits to unlearn yet." Kowalski looked at me. "What are we starting with?" 22, I said. "Something he can handle." We started with safety. I made Jake repeat the rules back to me 3 times before I'd even let him hold the rifle. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Never point the muzzle at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Know your target and what's beyond it. Jake was impatient at first, rolling his eyes when I made him practice the stance without ammunition, then with snap caps, then finally with real bullets. But as the afternoon wore on, something changed. He started asking questions, good questions, about breath control and sight alignment and how wind could affect a bullet's trajectory. His first shot was wild, missing the target completely. His second wasn't much better. But by his 10th shot, he was hitting the paper consistently, and by his 20th, he was grouping shots in the black. He had steady hands and good eyes, and more than that, he had focus. For the first time since I'd been back, I saw him truly concentrate on something, pouring all of his attention into the narrow space between the front sight and the bullseye. "Not bad," I said when we were packing up. "You've got natural ability." He tried to hide his pleasure, but I caught the small smile before he turned away. "It's okay, I guess. We'll come back next week," I said, "if you want." "Oh. Yeah," he said, too quickly, then caught himself. "I mean, whatever, if you want to." But I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to. The shooting lessons became a weekly ritual. Every Saturday morning we'd drive out to the range and Jake would work on his marksmanship while I gave him instruction that went beyond just pulling the trigger. I taught him about different types of ammunition, about how rifles and pistols functioned. About the physics of ballistics. He was smart, smarter than I'd given him credit for, and he absorbed everything like a sponge. More importantly, he started talking to me. Not about anything deep at first, just observations about the other shooters at the range or questions about the mechanics of the guns we were using. But gradually, the conversations expanded. He told me about school. About kids he didn't like, about teachers who were unfair. I told him stories about the army. It didn't involve combat. Funny stories about drill sergeants and practical jokes and the kinds of friendships that form when people depend on each other for survival. After a month of shooting lessons, I suggested we try something different. Camping? Jake said when I brought it up. Like intense? Like intense, I confirmed. This weekend, just overnight, I want to show you some things you can't learn at the range. He was skeptical, but he agreed. Sarah was less enthusiastic. You think it's a good idea? She asked. Taking him out into the middle of nowhere when you're just starting to connect? I think it's exactly what we need, I said. Some time away from everything else, just us. The camping trip almost didn't happen. Jake changed his mind twice, claiming he had plans with friends or homework to do. But when Saturday morning came, he was waiting by the truck with a backpack, looking nervous but determined. I took him to a place I'd discovered during my first months back, a section of state forest about 2 hours north of town. It wasn't wilderness exactly. There were marked trails and designated camping areas, but it was quiet and removed from the distractions that seemed to define Jake's life. I taught him how to set up a proper campsite. How to choose level ground and consider wind direction and proximity to water. I showed him how to build a fire without matches, using steel and flint and the kind of dry tinder that could catch a spark. He was awkward at first, all thumbs and frustration, but when he finally got that first flame to catch and hold, the look on his face was worth every moment of his initial reluctance. You did that, I said. Fire from nothing but what you found in the woods. He poked at the flames with a stick, watching them dance. It's not that hard once you know how. Most things aren't, I said, once you know how. We cooked dinner over the fire. Nothing fancy, just hot dogs and beans from a can, but it tasted better than any restaurant meal I'd ever had. Jake asked me questions about survival, about what someone would do if they were lost in the woods, about how long a person could go without food or water. I answered them all, drawing on knowledge I'd gained in the army and earlier, during my own childhood adventures with my father. As the night wore on and the fire burned down to coals, our conversation grew more personal. Jake told me about the kids at school who gave him trouble, about teachers who seemed to have it in for him. About the pressure he felt to fit in with friends who didn't really care about him. Mom says you were gone because of the war. He said suddenly, staring into the glowing embers. That's true, I said, but other soldiers came home. Tommy Henderson's dad did 2 tours and he never missed Tommy's birthday. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. You're right, I could have come home sooner. I chose not to. Why? It was the question I'd been dreading for 3 years, the one I wasn't sure I could answer honestly without destroying what little progress we'd made. But sitting there in the darkness with nothing but the fire between us, it felt like the time for truth. Because I was scared, I said. Because over there I knew who I was. I knew my job and I was good at it. And instead of learning, I ran away. Jake was quiet for a long time. And then Sarah would send them, and I'd look at them and wonder what you were thinking, what you liked, what made you laugh. But thinking about you and being there for you are two different things. And I chose wrong. Yeah, he said. You did. The words stung, but they were fair, more than fair, and somehow hearing him say them out loud felt like progress. We went camping 3 more times over the next 2 months. Each trip, I taught him something new: how to read a compass and navigate by landmarks, how to purify water using tablets or boiling or improvised filters, how to identify edible plants and set simple snares for small game. He was a quick learner, and more than that, he seemed to genuinely enjoy the challenge of using his hands and his mind to solve practical problems. The change in him was gradual but unmistakable. He was getting into less trouble at school, spending more time at home, asking fewer questions about when he could get his driver's license and more about when we could go on our next camping trip. Sarah noticed too. Whatever you're doing with him, she said one evening after Jake had gone to bed, keep doing it. He's different, better. He's the same kid he always was, I said. He just needed someone to see that he was worth the effort. He needed his father, she said simply. In late August, just before school started, I suggested our most ambitious trip yet, 3 days and 2 nights in a more remote section of the forest, where the trails were unmarked and the camping was truly primitive. Jake was excited about the challenge and I was confident in his skills. What I hadn't counted on was the weather. We set out on a Thursday morning under clear skies, with backpacks loaded with enough supplies for the planned 3 days. The first day went perfectly. We hiked 8 miles into the forest, found a good campsite near a small stream, and set up our base camp. Jake built the fire on his own while I gathered firewood and prepared our dinner. We talked about his upcoming junior year, about classes he was looking forward to and colleges he might want to consider. You think I'm smart enough for college? He asked as we sat by the fire. I think you're smart enough for anything you want to do, I said. The question is what you want. I don't know yet, he said, but I want to figure it out. It was the most hopeful thing I'd heard him say since I'd been back. The storm hit during the second night without warning. One moment we were sleeping peacefully in our separate tents, and the next we were being battered by wind and rain that turned the forest into a chaos of falling branches and flooding streams. I was awake instantly, my military training kicking in, and I could hear Jake calling my name from his tent. Dad! Dad! What's happening? The word stopped me cold. In 3 years he'd never called me Dad, not once. It had always been Marcus or him or nothing at all. But now, scared and disoriented in the darkness, he'd reached for the word instinctively. It's okay, I called back, struggling into my rain gear. Just a storm, stay in your tent. But even as I said it, I could hear the creek rising, the gentle stream we'd camped beside turning into something that sounded like a freight train. In the lightning flashes, I could see water rushing past our campsite, and I realized we were in serious trouble. Jake, I yelled, we have to move, now. His tent zipper was stuck, and I had to help him force it open. He stumbled out into the storm, soaked instantly, his eyes wide with fear. The creek's flooding, I said, having to shout to be heard over the wind. We need to get to higher ground. We grabbed what we could, our packs, sleeping bags, the essential supplies, and stumbled away from the campsite just as the creek overflowed its banks. In the darkness and confusion, with rain driving horizontally and lightning turning the world into a strobing nightmare, we got separated from the trail. By the time we found shelter under a rock overhang, we were both exhausted, soaked, and completely lost. Are we going to die? Jake asked, and his voice was small and young in a way I hadn't heard since he was little. No, I said firmly. We're not going to die, we're going to wait for the storm to pass, and then we're going to figure out where we are and how to get home. But even as I said it, I was doing the mental calculations. We had some food and water, but not enough for more than a day or two. Our sleeping bags were wet, which meant hypothermia was a real risk if the temperature dropped. And without the trail markers, finding our way back to civilization could take longer than our supplies would last. The storm raged for 6 hours, We huddled together under the overhang, sharing body heat and taking turns keeping watch. Jake was scared. I could feel him shaking, and not just from the cold, but he didn't panic. Instead, he asked questions. What did we have in terms of supplies? Which direction should we try to go when the storm passed? How could we signal for help? You're thinking like a soldier, I told him. Assess the situation, identify your resources, make a plan. Is that what you did in Afghanistan? He asked. When things got bad, that's what I did, I said, and it's what we're going to do now. When dawn finally came, the storm had passed, but the world it left behind was transformed. Trees were down everywhere, streams had become rivers, and familiar landmarks were unrecognizable. We were definitely lost, with no clear sense of which direction would lead us back to safety. Okay, I said, spreading out the wet map and trying to get our bearings. Here's what we know. We were camped here. I pointed to a spot on the map, and the storm pushed us roughly northwest. The main road is about 15 miles south of our original campsite, so if we can find our way back to that general area, we should be able to find help. Jake studied the map with me, asking intelligent questions about topography and water sources and the most efficient route. For the first time since I'd known him, we were truly working together, our survival depending on our ability to function as a team. We made good time the first few hours, following what appeared to be an old logging road that ran roughly in the direction we wanted to go. But by midday, the road had deteriorated into nothing more than a deer path, and we found ourselves in dense forest with no clear way forward. We're lost, aren't we? Jake said. He was trying to sound calm, but I could hear the edge of panic creeping into his voice. We're temporarily misplaced, I said. There's a difference. What's the difference? Lost people panic. Misplaced people make plans. I taught him how to read the forest, how to use the sun and the moss on tree trunks, and the direction of water flow to determine direction. We climbed a tall ridge to get a better view of the surrounding area, and from the top we could see smoke in the distance. Not wildfire smoke, but the thin steady column that suggested a cabin or ranger station. There, I said, pointing. That's where we're going. The hike took the rest of the day. We had to cross 2 swollen streams and navigate around several blowdowns where the storm had knocked down entire sections of forest. Jake never complained, never asked to rest, never suggested that maybe we should just wait for rescue. He followed my lead, trusted my judgment, and when I asked him to do something, climb over a fallen tree, ford a stream, scramble up a rocky slope, he did it without question. By the time we reached the source of the smoke, a small ranger cabin manned by a weathered old man named Pete, we were both exhausted but triumphant. Pete gave us hot coffee, and let us use his radio to call for help, and within 2 hours, a search and rescue team had arrived to take us back to civilization. You boys did good, Pete said as we waited for our ride. Lot of folks would have panicked, tried to move around in that storm. You kept your heads, made smart decisions. My dad taught me, Jake said, and the words hit me harder than any medal or commendation I'd ever received in the army. On the drive home, Jake was quiet for a long time. Then as we turned into our neighborhood, he spoke. I was wrong, he said. What I said before about you not getting a vote. You do get a vote. You're my dad. I had to pull over because I couldn't see through the tears. I'm sorry, I said, for leaving, for missing so much of your life, for being such a coward. You came back, he said. That's what matters. I should have come back sooner. Yeah, he said, but you're here now. That night, Sarah made us both hot soup and listened to our story. Jake told most of it, describing our navigation techniques and survival strategies, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd discovered something he was truly good at. When he got to the part about calling me dad during the storm, Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. He's been practicing, she said later, after Jake had gone to bed. Saying dad when he talks about you. I've heard him. I don't deserve it, I said. Maybe not, she said. But he's giving it to you anyway. That's what love is. The following Saturday, Jake asked if we could go to the shooting range. I want to work on long-distance shooting, he said. Maybe try some competition stuff. That's expensive, I warned him. Competition rifles, match ammunition, range fees. I'll get a job, he said. After school and weekends. I've been thinking about it anyway. At the range, I watched him set up his shooting position with the methodical care I'd taught him, checking his sight alignment and breathing pattern before taking each shot. His groups were tight, consistent, the result of hours of practice and instruction. But more than that, he looked confident, capable, sure of himself in a way that had nothing to do with teenage bravado, and everything to do with genuine competence. You know, I said, as we were packing up, if you're serious about this, there are shooting scholarships for college, marksmanship programs that could help pay your way. His face lit up. Really? Really? We'd have to work on it, get you to some competitions, build up a record. But you've got the skills. Would you help me? He asked. I mean, would you be my coach? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with all the years of absence and resentment and missed opportunities, but also with hope, with the possibility of a future built on something solid. I'd be honored, I said. That was 2 years ago. Jake's a senior now, captain of the high school rifle team, headed to college on a partial marksmanship scholarship. He's got a part-time job at the local sporting goods store, teaching gun safety to new shooters. On weekends we still go camping, still practice survival skills, still talk around campfires about everything and nothing. Last month, he asked me to help him fill out his application for Army ROTC. I want to serve, he said, like you did, but I want to do it right. Come home when I'm supposed to come home. Are you sure? I asked. There are other ways to serve, other paths. I'm sure, he said, but I want you to know something. If I have kids someday, I'm going to be there for them. Every game, every school play, every bedtime story. Because that's what fathers do. He said it without accusation, without anger, just as a statement of fact, a promise he was making to children who didn't exist yet. Good, I said. That's what they deserve. Tonight, Jake's at a friend's house, probably staying up too late and eating too much pizza. Sarah's at book club. I'm sitting in my garage, cleaning my rifles and thinking about the strange circuitous path that brought me here. 10 years I was gone, 3 years I've been back. And in all that time, the most important battle I ever fought wasn't in some dusty Afghan valley. It was right here, in my own backyard, for the heart of a boy who had every right to hate me but chose love instead. Tomorrow Jake and I are driving to a shooting competition 3 hours north. It's a 2-day event, which means a hotel room and long conversations and the kind of easy companionship that used to seem impossible. He's nervous about the competition. It's his first time shooting against college-level marksmen, but I'm not worried. He's got steady hands and a good eye, and more importantly, the confidence that comes from knowing he can handle whatever comes his way. He's got something else too, something it took me too long to understand. He's got a father who's learned the difference between being present and just being here, who's figured out that love isn't just a feeling but a choice you make every day, in small moments and big decisions. I wasn't there when he was born. I wasn't there for his first steps, or his first words, or his first day of school. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. Not because it erases the years I lost, but because it makes possible all the years we still have ahead of us. The strange uncle who came home from war has become something better. A father who learned that the most important battles are the ones fought not with weapons, but with patience and presence and the stubborn refusal to give up on the people you love, even when, especially when, they have every reason to give up on you.